Welcome back to the 1320 books. I'm going to get this thing started right now.
Welcome to this week's episode of the 1320 Books, an exploration of works we all should read, with your host, Seán Dwyer. Today, on his journey through 1,320 books, Seán will explore Walden by Henry David Thoreau, a memoir that is neither boring nor irrelevant in our times. Get your copy at villagebooks.com. Now, I'll turn this over to Seán.
Yeah, thank you. And here we are. First book of 1,320 with your host, moi, Seán Dwyer. We're going to talk today about a book that I think has a problematic reputation that it should not have. Walden relates to Henry David Thoreau's 2 years spent in a cabin he built himself on Walden Pond in Massachusetts. Given that the book was written a couple of years after he finished his 2-year sojourn, you would think that in the mid-1840s, anything written is going to be dry and hard to get through. And I want to dispel that rumor or suspicion on your part. Let me tell you a little background about my experience with Thoreau. First of all, when I was 7, I had a stamp collection, and the U.S. Postal Service put out a Henry David Thoreau stamp. And my mom got me one that said, "Look, it's Henry David Thoreau." And I said, okay, not knowing who Henry David Thoreau was. But my mom knew who he was, and so I went along with that. And so I've known who this guy was, in a sense, ever since I was 7 years old, which would make 57 years. But, and you should be seeing the stamp here at some point, right? Get the stamp up there? Thanks. The first time I was exposed to him as a writer was when I was in an undergraduate 300 level literature class at Indiana University with Professor Christoph Lohmann. So we read The Transcendentalists. And what does that mean? Well, it doesn't matter. But we read Walt Whitman, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and we made it to Melville. And I have to admit, and I don't know if it was because I was working so much or because the first chunk of the book was totally about nautical terminology, and it was really, really hard to get through, that I gave up on Moby Dick. After Moby Dick ruined my taste for the mid-1800s literature style, I decided I don't have to read this one because I had to write a paper about it. So I got my Walden open, and just like today, I got a trusty cup of something warm to drink. And I went at it. But the difference between Moby Dick and Walden was like the difference between the sea and dry land. I started reading, and I realized that Thoreau, number one, wrote very concisely. He was very organized. He was able to express what he wanted to in the fewest number of words possible. And what he expressed was intriguing. He was very educated. It was quite obvious because he included a considerable amount of Latin quotations, and I'm pretty sure he knew them off the top of his head. And because in his cabin, I'm sure he had no access to Google. It was still not burdensome to read Thoreau. Plus, he had intriguing ideas. Among them were the concept of, economy, which led him to build his cabin on property owned by his friend, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who I think those two decided to have to do a proof of concept thing that you could live like a transcendentalist. You could live cheaply, you could live peacefully. Now, Thoreau lived on the pond, maybe a mile from Concord, Massachusetts, but, and people hold it in disdain for that at times, but he never said that he didn't live near Concord. He never said this was a situation where he was completely out in the middle of nowhere. He simply was living simply. And one of the things that he did was decide he didn't need to buy coffee. I, however, am drinking coffee. Now, why didn't he need coffee? Because if he didn't buy coffee, he didn't have to work as much. And some of the people he talked to, a couple of Irishmen, he told them, if you cut back on your expenditures on luxury items like coffee and sugar, then you would be able to work less and have more time to enjoy your family. And that might be true for all of us. That if we decided we were willing to live without what? Cable? We could probably that's like $200 a month we wouldn't have to work for. Could cut maybe 10 hours of work out of your time, right? Something like that. But if you got rid of your cable, you wouldn't be able to see my podcast. So don't need to go there. Okay. And yet Thoreau had valid points about a lot of his goals and philosophy. I was impressed from the very beginning with the ideas, and every time I look at that book, it makes sense to me, and it makes me want to cut my expenses and expenditures down so that I can retire earlier or something. And so he wrote an extremely readable book with philosophy that makes sense in our times and does not make you feel guilty about being who you are, unless you should feel guilty. Okay. And as a result of that, I got really connected with Walden as a concept. And then we had to write a paper. In the chapter on sounds, Thoreau talks about the locomotive. And the locomotive is a fine thing, except when it's whistling, which is kind of annoying. But it gets people back and forth, it brings goods. So he's not opposed to modern conveniences and conveyances. He is just saying that it's a disruption when the train hoots. So he was on the leading edge of this technology and, for the most part, treated it positively, which for somebody who seems to be almost hermit-like in what he wrote could possibly be considered a contradiction. But really, Thoreau is all about living with technology and with people in the most effective way. So the other sound that he brings up in that chapter is the sound of owls hooting. So of course you're primarily going to hear those at night, and thus the train hoots, the owls hoot. And I wrote a paper comparing those sounds and what Thoreau thought of them. This paper made it clear to me that I could write well. And so Thoreau, for that reason, has always been a friend of mine, almost like a long dead mentor, through his instruction by means of the quality of his own writing. He really is an exceptional writer. And I wish that people understood better how delightful it is to read his words. Something else that's really interesting is that even if you haven't read Walden, you have heard a bunch of his words. So I'm going to offer you some quotes from this book. You know, there are a lot of books that really aren't quoted very much, but Walden is just full of things that people have decided are worth repeating. How about this one? The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. Know that one. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them, castles in the air. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. This one's lovely. How many a man has dated a new era in his life from the reading of a book. And here's one that I have not really seen people pull as a quote, but I did, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things he wrote. He said, "The finest qualities of our nature, like the bloom on fruits, can be preserved only by the most delicate handling, yet we do not treat ourselves nor one another thus tenderly." Keep that one in your mind. Treat yourself well, and be delicate with others as well. That's really the point about Walden that I would like to leave you with. So what's coming up? Next week, we are going to look at Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. That one is right here. Okay. I am going to give away at some point my original college Walden book. If you join my Substack, I will give you that, the opportunity to win a drawing to have me send it to you simply for the cost of postage, with an inscription from me if you want it. I cherish this old copy, and I would like somebody to have it to enjoy. And also, I should mention that copy of Fahrenheit 451 belongs to Village Books in Bellingham, Washington, and it will go back to them. It's on loan so that I can show you the pictures. I also would like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and also to Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, as well as my podcast, The 1320 Books, on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to join my Substack, it's the1320books.substack.com. And we're having a little bit of conversation over there, and that is where you could get into the running to get this book from me. Okay. And on that note, I'm going to turn you back over to the team to wrap up with the outro. Remember, next week, Fahrenheit 451, and the week after that will be A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. That is one of the books by him that I had not read. I have finished reading it, and I'm looking forward to talking about it because it has a lot more substance than I expected it to. Can't wait. Okay. See you next week. We are now 1/1320th of the way through this Odyssey with a mere 1,319 books to go. Bye-bye.
This episode of the 1320 Books was produced by Seán Dwyer and distributed by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Special thanks for the kind support of Village Books in Bellingham, Washington, and Gray Matter Press. That's Gray with an A. The 1320 Books is a production of The Brain Initiative Incorporated. Text and sound recording copyright 2025 by Seán Dwyer. All rights reserved. This is Barbara for the 1320 team, asking you to like, subscribe, and comment. And don't forget to ring the YouTube bell so you can stay on top when new episodes drop. Above all, keep reading!